Welcome back on an exciting night here in the National Newsroom. It's not every day we welcome a Canadian luminary. The first Canadian female solo singer to reach #1 on the U.S. charts and first to earn a gold record for this signature song.
For decades, a voice pure as crystal captivated millions, turning a small-town singer into a global titan. Then, the music vanished. Rumors swirled as stage lights went dark, leaving a lingering question. What drove Canada's Queen of Song to retreat behind closed doors? Beyond 4 decades of applause lay a gauntlet of hidden scandals, terrifying obsessive threats, and deeply personal heartbreak. This is the untold story of Anne Murray and the quiet sanctuary she fought a lifetime to reach. What really happened to Anne Murray? Perched along the chilly gray waters of Halifax, Nova Scotia, stands a home shielded from the world. Behind its windows, away from the glaring spotlights that once dictated her every breath, lives a woman whose voice once filled stadiums and dominated global airwaves. Today, the deafening roar of tens of thousands of cheering fans has been replaced by the quiet, rhythmic crashing of the Atlantic tide. For Anne Murray, this coastal sanctuary is not merely a residence. It is a fortress built after surviving 4 decades inside the relentless machine of global superstardom. To the casual observer passing by, there is no grand spectacle, no entourage, and no sprawling security detail guarding a diva. Instead, you see a woman living on her own terms, working out with a personal trainer twice a week, playing golf under the crisp maritime sky, and taking long, quiet swims. Yet, to understand the sheer weight of this tranquil present, one must grasp the jarring nature of her abrupt exit. Artists of her magnitude rarely just walk away. They stage elaborate farewell tours, cling to the nostalgia of their youth, or fade slowly under the glaring eyes of a public that refuses to let them age. Murray did none of those things. In 2008, at the peak of her control, she simply closed the piano lid, put down the microphone, and walked into the shadows. This deliberate retreat triggered a wave of speculation. Rumors persisted for years, whispering of secret illnesses, dramatic family feuds, or financial ruin forcing her into hiding. But the reality is far more compelling than tabloid fiction. Murray's isolation was not a desperate escape from a crisis. It was a calculated reclamation of her own humanity. She had spent a lifetime giving her voice, her time, and her private identity to an insatiable public. When she felt her legendary vocal range begin to shift with age, she made a fierce decision. She would never allow her legacy to be degraded by a voice operating at anything less than absolute perfection. Now, in the peaceful solitude of Halifax, the silence is intentional. She rarely grants interviews, steadfastly turns down lucrative offers for reunion concerts, and protects her privacy with unwavering discipline. The woman who became Canada's first female solo megastar, earning 4 Grammy Awards and selling over 55 million records, now finds her greatest triumph in simple, unscripted days. She frequents local spots without fanfare, reconnects with her roots, and reflects on a past that few could ever comprehend. Yet, this quiet waterfront existence is not a story of passive retirement. It is the hard-won final chapter of a woman who clawed her way through decades of suffocating pressure, personal betrayal, and emotional sacrifice. The silence she enjoys today was bought at a devastatingly high price. Let's look back at the terrifying, chaotic storm she spent 40 years trying to survive to understand the quiet fortress she guards so fiercely in Nova Scotia. A small-town girl and the accidental rise. Long before she was selling out arenas across North America, the girl born Morna Anne Murray was navigating a vastly different world in Spring Hill, Nova Scotia. Nestled deep within the rugged terrain of Cumberland County, Spring Hill was a tough, working-class coal mining town where resilience was not a choice, but a daily requirement for survival. Raised in a bustling household with 5 brothers, Murray learned early how to hold her ground, developing a straightforward, practical demeanor that would later define her entire public persona. Her father, a local physician, and her mother, a nurse, instilled a rigid sense of discipline and responsibility. Music was always floating through the rooms of their home, from classical records to country radio broadcasts. Yet the idea of pursuing a commercial singing career seemed not only impractical, but entirely absurd for a girl from a humble maritime community. Her original ambition was modest and entirely practical: physical education. After completing high school, she enrolled at the University of New Brunswick, earning a degree with the intention of leading a quiet, stable life as a physical education teacher. For a brief period, she did exactly that, teaching high school students in New Brunswick while holding a whistle and keeping a low profile. But her distinctive, rich contralto voice, a natural instrument of uncanny pitch and effortless warm depth, could not remain hidden for long. Her initial entry into the entertainment industry was less a calculated leap and more an accidental slip through an open door. While still a university student, she auditioned for a Canadian Broadcasting Corporation television show titled Sing-Along Jubilee. Initially turned down because the cast already featured a female soloist, she was later called back when the producer decided to expand the cast. That producer was Bill Langstroth, a man who would soon become the most influential, complicated, and agonizing figure in her personal and professional life. What began as a summer television gig quickly spiraled into something far larger than Murray had ever envisioned or desired. Record executives soon recognized that her voice possessed a rare, universal quality that transcended traditional genre boundaries. She was neither purely country nor strictly pop. Her delivery was grounded, authentic, and instantly recognizable. Signing with Capitol Records, she recorded her debut studio album in 1968. But it was her 1969 single, Snowbird, that ignited an unprecedented media wildfire. Written by Gene McClellan, Snowbird became a juggernaut. It swept across international airwaves, shattering records and transforming Murray into the first Canadian female solo artist to achieve a certified gold record in the United States. Almost overnight, the quiet physical education teacher from Spring Hill was thrust into the blinding spotlight of international stardom. American talk shows, late-night television appearances, and demanding concert schedules descended upon her with terrifying velocity. Yet, as the checks rolled in and the applause grew deafening, the immense psychological strain began to take its toll. The shift from a structured, predictable life in the Maritimes to the chaotic, hyper-visible world of American showbiz was jarring. She found herself perpetually exhausted, living out of suitcases, and forced to project an image of wholesome, effortless perfection while operating in an industry notorious for chewing up young talent. The pressure to continually produce hit records created a pressure cooker of anxiety. The girl from the small coal mining town had suddenly become a valuable corporate asset, surrounded by managers, handlers, and record executives who viewed her voice as a money-printing machine. The dream had materialized, but it came with an overwhelming sense of isolation. Behind the flawless pitch and the squeaky-clean, wholesome girl-next-door persona that Capitol Records aggressively marketed to the world lay a secret that threatened to blow her rising career wide open: loving the wrong man. While the public envisioned Murray as the untainted starlet of family-friendly television, her private life was entangled in a deep, highly scandalous emotional crisis. The center of this turmoil was Bill Langstroth, the charismatic co-producer and host of Sing-Along Jubilee, the very television program that had launched her into the public eye. Langstroth was not merely her professional mentor and the chief architect of her early broadcasting success. He was also 15 years her senior, her direct superior at the network, and, most crucially, a married man with 2 young children. What began as a quiet professional dynamic quickly morphed into a secret, intense romance that spanned years in the shadows. In the early 70s, a public revelation of an extramarital affair involving a major television producer and a rising young pop icon would have instantly destroyed both of their careers. The conservative media landscape of the era was merciless, and Murray's brand was built entirely on warmth, sincerity, and unblemished moral integrity. A single tabloid break would have shattered her reputation, alienated her conservative fan base in both Canada and the United States, and prompted radio stations to pull her records from the airwaves. Forced into total secrecy, the pair constructed an elaborate facade to conceal their relationship from the media, fans, and industry insiders. They met in quiet hotel rooms, traveled separately to public events, and communicated through coded phone calls while operating in plain sight on set. The psychological toll of living this double life was staggering for Murray. She was a deeply moral woman raised in a strict maritime household with rigid values, and the guilt of being involved with a married father weighed on her heavily. She found herself constantly torn between her overwhelming feelings for Langstroth and the painful awareness that her happiness was built upon the covert destruction of another family's domestic stability. The pressure inside this secret relationship was further intensified by the surrounding gossip mill. Because Murray kept her romantic life entirely hidden and refused to date the high-profile male celebrities who courted her, the press began to speculate wildly about her personal life. Persistent, malicious rumors questioned her identity and romantic preferences, creating an agonizing irony. While the public whispered about made-up scandals, the real scandal was sitting directly beside her in recording studios and production meetings disguised as professional collaboration. Langstroth eventually left his wife, but the drama was far from over. Even after his divorce was finalized, the couple could not simply step out into the sunlight together. They had to carefully time their public appearances and eventual marriage to minimize media backlash and protect Murray's lucrative career momentum. When they finally married in a private, low-key ceremony in 1975, the union took place under a lingering cloud of controversy and quiet judgment from both industry peers and the public. Yet, winning the man she had loved in secret for years did not bring the idyllic, peaceful life Murray had envisioned during those long years of hiding. The dynamic between them had shifted permanently. Langstroth stepped out of the direct television spotlight to manage her life and family, creating a complex power balance where he moved from her powerful boss to a spouse living in the shadow of her massive global fame. The emotional strain that had built up during years of lies, clandestine meetings, and pervasive guilt left deep, unshakable scars on their foundation. The forbidden romance that had survived years of intense public scrutiny had finally emerged into the open air, but the toxic stress required to protect it had already planted the seeds for future heartbreak. As Murray's global profile exploded into multi-platinum record sales and world tours in the late 70s, she would quickly realize a brutal truth about her personal life. Escaping the shadows of her hidden affair did not mean she had escaped the darkness. In fact, the true price of her monumental stardom was only beginning to be exacted: fame, stalkers, and financial ruin. By the turn of the 80s, Anne Murray was no longer just a household name in Canada. She had crossed over into the upper echelon of global pop royalty. With timeless chart toppers like You Needed Me and Danny's Song, her recordings generated vast sums of revenue, filling arena seats across North America and securing her place among the elite hitmakers of the era. Yet, behind the bright lights, gilded trophies, and dazzling record sales, her life was rapidly transforming into a gilded cage. As her public image radiated stability, calm, and soothing maternal warmth, her private reality was quietly unraveling under the constant threat of unseen dangers. The most terrifying shadow came in the form of a relentless, obsessive stalker who fixated on her for over 2 decades. What began as unsettling fan mail quickly escalated into a nightmare that haunted her daily existence. Strange packages arrived at her addresses, unannounced appearances were made at venue security gates, and disturbing, delusional letters claimed a deep, cosmic connection between them. For 20 agonizing years, Murray lived in a heightened state of alert. Every backstage hallway, every hotel lobby, and every dimly lit parking garage became a potential battleground. She was forced to hire private security details, alter her travel itineraries at a moment's notice, and constantly check over her shoulder while performing under blinding spotlights. The sheer psychological terror was exhausting. While thousands of fans cheered in front of her, she was left scanning the front rows, wondering if the face of her tormentor was lurking just beyond the edge of the stage. The warm, comforting voice that brought peace to millions belonged to a woman paralyzed by fear inside her own skin. If the threat to her physical safety was not enough to shatter her sense of security, the threat to her financial livelihood proved equally devastating. As her concert earnings and royalty checks soared into the tens of millions, Murray placed her implicit trust in financial advisors, business managers, and corporate partners to handle the complex machinery of her empire. Unbeknownst to her, that misplaced trust was being actively exploited. Through a combination of reckless investments, poorly conceived business ventures, and outright financial mismanagement, millions of dollars dissolved into thin air. When she finally uncovered the true extent of the damage, the realization was catastrophic. Despite decades of non-stop touring, relentless recording schedules, and physical exhaustion, vast fortunes had simply vanished. She was left facing severe financial liabilities, forced to stay on the road for grueling months at a time just to cover mounting operational debts and keep her enterprise afloat. The very career she had sacrificed her personal life to build had become a treadmill she could not afford to step off. At the same time, navigating the high-stakes world of international entertainment exposed her to volatile personalities and the darker eccentricities of showbiz. She watched firsthand as fellow artists succumbed to the brutal demands of the industry. The tragic trajectories of peers like British soul icon Dusty Springfield, a deeply complex vocalist who recorded the song "I Just Fall in Love Again" before Murray made it a smash hit, only to watch her own career falter, served as stark reminders of how unforgiving the music business could be. Where other stars turned to substance abuse, destructive outbursts, or tragic breakdowns to cope with the relentless pressure, Murray retreated inward, constructing an ever thicker wall of emotional defense to preserve her sanity. The physical toll of this lifestyle was equally unrelenting. Constant air travel, changing climates, and endless nights on stage strained her vocal cords to their limit. She lived in constant fear of losing the one asset that supported her family, her band, and her entire corporate staff. Every scratchy throat or minor cold became an existential crisis, threatening to cancel shows that were financially necessary to offset her manager's bad investments. By the mid-'80s, Murray had achieved everything a musical artist could dream of: Grammys, Country Music Association awards, platinum records, and global recognition. Yet, the price of that crown was staggering. She was trapped in a grueling cycle of security threats, financial betrayal, and relentless work demands. The golden cage had locked its doors, and the physical and emotional cost was beginning to bleed into the one sanctuary she held most dear: her home, her marriage, and the children who waited for her while she conquered the world. While her career demanded her constant, exhausting presence on high-profile stages around the world, Anne Murray's heart was perpetually pulled back home to Canada. The price her family paid. Motherhood brought immense joy to her life, with the arrival of her son, William, and her daughter, Dawn. But alongside that joy, it introduced an agonizing, relentless companion that would follow her for decades: deep maternal guilt. Balancing the crushing demands of international stardom with the delicate, evolving needs of growing children proved to be the most grueling, emotionally hazardous tightrope walk of her entire life. Every time her tour bus pulled out of the driveway or her flight departed for another multi-week promotional swing through the United States, Europe, or Australia, a vital piece of her spirit fractured. Leaving her young children behind left a hollow, lingering ache in her chest that no sold-out arena, roaring crowd, or standing ovation could ever soothe. She found herself perpetually torn between two completely irreconcilable worlds: the public pop idol, who belonged to millions of demanding fans, and the devoted mother who desperately longed to sit at the family dinner table, attend elementary school plays, help with homework, and kiss her children goodnight. The constant, forced separation created a lingering emotional strain on the household, forcing Murray to miss dozens of precious developmental milestones that no amount of wealth, awards, or global fame could ever buy back. This emotional fracture deepened drastically As her children reached adolescence and the hidden subterranean toll of growing up in the heavy shadow of a global icon became tragically clear. Her daughter, Dawn, began battling a severe, life-threatening eating disorder that shattered the quiet peace of their home. Watching her teenage daughter wither away under the cruel, unyielding grip of anorexia nervosa was a living nightmare that brought the international superstar to her knees. All the financial resources, cultural influence, and global prestige in the world rendered Murray completely helpless against an insidious internal disease consuming her child from within. The famous mother, who had built a multi-million-dollar career providing comfort, hope, and emotional strength to millions of listeners worldwide, was forced to confront a brutal, heart-wrenching reality. She could not simply sing away her own daughter's excruciating pain. This profound medical crisis forced Murray to confront the terrifying daily possibility of losing her child, sparking a long, agonizing journey through specialized treatment centers, endless therapy sessions, and terrifying emergency hospital visits. The private agony tested her personal resilience to its absolute limit. While she forced herself to put on a brave, smiling face for television cameras and kept up her exhausting global performance obligations to support her enterprise, her inner world was entirely consumed by fear, helplessness, and the crushing, silent suspicion that her own chaotic, hyper-visible career had played an unwitting role in her family's unspoken psychological trauma. Simultaneously, the very foundation of her home life was crumbling into dust. Her 22-year marriage to Bill Langstroth, the man she had loved through years of clandestine rendezvous, public media scandals, and career turmoil, was quietly fracturing beyond repair. The foundational dynamic between the couple had gradually shifted over 2 decades of constant public exposure. Langstroth, who had once been her formidable television producer, career mentor, and dominant partner, had gradually stepped deep into the background, living and operating almost entirely in the shadow of her colossal, multi-platinum global success. This delicate, inverted balance of power, coupled with the lingering emotional scars of how their controversial romance had originally begun, created a quiet, insurmountable rift inside the household. The heavy, relentless emotional strain of raising children under the glaring spotlight of international fame, combined with long periods of forced physical distance and unresolved romantic resentments, slowly eroded what was left of their marital intimacy. They had successfully survived ruthless music industry pressures, terrifying security threats, and constant public judgment. But they could not survive the quiet, irreversible growing apart of two people who had fundamentally changed over 20 years. In 1997, after years of trying to hold the broken domestic facade together for the sake of their children and the press, the couple quietly separated, finalizing a painful, definitive divorce the following year. The dissolution of her marriage was a crushing, demoralizing blow. The idyllic domestic sanctuary that Murray had fought so hard to build and protect while conquering the competitive global music world had completely unraveled around her. She was left sitting alone in a large, quiet house, grappling with the lingering guilt of a broken family, the haunting memories of a failed union, and the heartbreaking realization that even the greatest voice in the world could not save everyone she loved from heartbreak. The core personal anchor points and key allies that had grounded her through 4 decades of industry chaos were about to be violently severed, one by one, pushing her toward the ultimate crossroads of her legendary life. Walking away from the noise. For nearly 30 years, the terrifying pressure, constant scrutiny, and operational madness of Anne Murray's global empire had been made manageable by a single immovable rock, her manager and closest friend, Leonard Rambeau. Rambeau was not merely an industry executive drafting contracts in dark boardrooms. He was the primary architect of her professional career, her protective shield against exploitative producers, and her most trusted personal confidant. When the music industry became overwhelming or her private life collapsed into public controversy, it was Rambeau who stood as her fortress. Then, the unthinkable happened. In the mid-90s, Rambeau was suddenly diagnosed with advanced colon cancer. Within a matter of months, the man who had expertly guided every single step of her unprecedented trajectory was gone at just 49 years old. The loss shattered Murray to her absolute core. For the first time since stepping off that small stage in Nova Scotia as a young physical education teacher, she felt completely unprotected and emotionally exposed in a cutthroat corporate industry she had never truly loved. The devastating blow of Rambeau's death was soon compounded by a relentless wave of personal grief. Shortly thereafter, her beloved mother, the steady, practical maritime anchor who had grounded her throughout her dizzying rise to international stardom, passed away. Stripped of her chief professional protector, her marriage, and her maternal lifeline, Murray found herself standing in the blinding spotlight entirely alone. The physical toll of singing night after night, coupled with the profound emotional grief consuming her personal life, forced her to confront a terrifying, inescapable reality. The machine was wearing her down to nothing. As she entered the 2000s, the global music landscape was undergoing a violent, irreversible shift. The era of golden-voiced pop titans was being rapidly replaced by auto-tuned digital production, youth-obsessed media, and sensationalized reality television. Record executives began suggesting subtle changes to her sound, asking her to chase modern radio trends to stay relevant. But Murray possessed a fierce, unyielding pride. Having sold tens of millions of records strictly on the pure, unadulterated quality of her natural voice, she vehemently refused to compromise her artistic integrity or become a sad, chasing parody of her former self. Simultaneously, she began noticing subtle, natural shifts in her legendary contralto vocal range. While her pitch remained razor-sharp, maintaining the effortless, pristine resonance that had defined her signature hits required an increasingly agonizing physical exertion. The thought of stepping onto a stage and delivering anything less than 100% perfection to her fans was completely unacceptable. She refused to allow the public to watch her voice slowly deteriorate under the grueling demands of touring, nor would she ever rely on pre-recorded backing tracks to fake her way through a performance. In 2008, after releasing her final studio album and completing a quiet, triumphant farewell swing, Anne Murray made a radical, startling decision. Without sensationalized press conferences, bitter public feuds, or dramatic media meltdowns, she simply closed the door. She walked away from multi-million-dollar touring offers, stepped off the global stage permanently, and turned her back on the blinding lights of showbiz forever, finding peace on her own terms. How does a small-town girl from Spring Hill, Nova Scotia, who never originally sought the blinding, volatile lights of global fame, make sense of a 4-decade career that fundamentally revolutionized the entire Canadian music industry? The true answer lies not in the gold and platinum records lining her private walls, nor in the historic shelf holding 26 Juno Awards and 4 Grammys. It lies in the total, unyielding sovereignty she achieved over her own life. Anne Murray did not merely build a successful recording career, she broke open the doors for generations of Canadian artists. She proved to an international industry historically dominated by American and British performers that a singer from rural Canada could achieve global dominance strictly on her own terms. She paved the explicit structural path for future megastars like Celine Dion, Shania Twain, and Sarah McLachlan to conquer international airwaves without ever having to sanitize or apologize for their maritime or Canadian origins. Anchor points across her historic discography reflect the defining chapters of that journey. Snowbird, 1969, the miraculous breakthrough single that started it all. Written by Gene McClellan, this uplifting track, with its deceptively bittersweet lyrics, shattered international radio barriers, making Murray the first Canadian female solo artist to achieve a certified gold record in the United States, and launching her into global stardom overnight. Danny's Song, originally written by Loggins and Messina, Murray's rendition stripped away all artificial studio slickness to reveal a raw, timeless, acoustic intimacy. Her velvety contralto transformed the track into a universal anthem of domestic hope, modest romantic devotion, and family resilience. You Needed Me, the crown jewel of her vocal legacy. This soaring ballad earned her a Grammy Award for Best Female Pop Vocal Performance, marking a rare instance of a country crossover artist defeating mainstream pop icons on their home turf. Its emotional depth and themes of gratitude and unconditional redemption resonated deeply with millions navigating their own quiet, personal storms. I Just Fall in Love Again. First recorded by the Carpenters and Dusty Springfield, Murray's masterstroke version brought an undeniable power to the track. Sweeping to the top of both the country and adult contemporary charts, it highlighted her signature ability to bridge genre divides seamlessly while delivering pure, unadulterated romance. A Little Good News. Released during a period of global political tension and economic anxiety, this reflective single struck a massive social chord. Earning her another Grammy, the song captured a collective, weary longing for hope and peace, solidifying her reputation as a comforting, steady vocal anchor in troubled times. Yet, the true victory of her narrative was never found under the blinding spotlights of Nashville, Los Angeles, or London. It was found in her rare, courageous ability to step away from them. While countless legends before and after her succumbed to the dark, addictive whirlpool of celebrity, destroying their health, fracturing their families, or becoming tragic parodies of their former selves on endless nostalgia circuits, Murray possessed the self-awareness to know when enough was enough. She had survived the secret agony of a scandalous, forbidden romance, the daily terror of a two-decade security stalker, devastating financial betrayal by trusted advisors, and the agonizing struggle to save her daughter from a life-threatening illness. She paid the staggering price of fame in full, down to the final cent. If this story moved you, hit subscribe to join us for more deep dives into the hidden lives of iconic legends.